Are you preparing for a case interview and need some last-minute help? Maybe you have a final round interview coming up in just a few days, or a big round of interviews this week. Whatever it is, at this stage of the game, there's only one thing that you can do to improve your chances of landing an offer, and that's expert out loud practice. Lucky for you, we have solutions. We have an amazing team of 25 McKinsey, Bain, and BCG coaches who are the world's foremost experts on acing the case interview, and they have availability to get you interview ready soon. You can purchase just 1 hour of coaching, you can purchase a 4-hour package, or go whole hog with our 8-hour black belt program, which not only includes the coaching, but a lot of amazing digital resources and drills and so much more. You can schedule your one-on-one Zoom session for as soon as 24 hours after purchase. So jump in today at the links in this episode's show notes. Oh, and by the way, if you're at a management consulted partner university, see your MC account for discounts on all of our coaching packages. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Strategy Simplified. I'm Jay with the Mask, your producer, and I'm excited to have you here with us today. If you're an MBA student, specifically a first-year MBA, then today's episode is a special treat for you because we're talking to you about case prep strategy in specific regards to MBA internship interviews. So you likely already know that interviews are coming up in January and February of 2025. In fact, some interviews will be as early as January 3rd. The majority will be January 6th to 10th, with a few going past that into February. So today's episode is all about setting you up for success in the case prep process. So Jenny Ray and myself, we share what we're hearing from our MBAs right now at this time of year, what you're thinking about, what your questions are. And then we do our best to answer those in the episode. We also talk about market sizing questions, how to solve those, why they're important to know. We talk about key information that MBAs are expected to know going into case interviews. We talk about write a case prep plan, key checkpoints to hit in the timeline to make sure you're prepared, and much more. So it's a really packed episode. You might want to get a notebook and take some notes here. If you've got a question, need help with recruiting, or you want to purchase coaching, check out links in the show notes for information, or send us an email for more. team@managementconsultant.com. Let's get into the podcast.
Here are a couple things that we're hearing from our MBAs. If I don't get in this cycle, am I dead in the water? And the answer is kind of yes, right? That is a very healthy and appropriate fear. A lot of the people who get access to consulting firms or to firms that use case interviews the second time around are people who they gave offers to who declined them for other firms, but you come back and you re-recruit, or people who did not recruit at all. So they had a moment of enlightenment in between year 1 and year 2. They did a different kind of internship. They did finance or marketing or something else. And then they came back and they were humbled and they were like, please, I would love to do this. This is the thing that I would love to do. In addition, the firms don't have forever memory, but they do have school-based memory. They will remember you. It won't be a fresh application the next time. And so it is pretty imperative that in this particular interview process, you get through the first round, right? Because bombing the first round is going to stick around for the later evaluations of your profiles. Second one is, how do I know when I'm ready for the interview? If you're a little bit scared, you still could be ready. So it's not how you feel. When you're ready is if you have gone around a circle of different programs and you can evaluate both yourself and other people when you feel like you're not having the depth of conversation that you need. A lot of people that are ready for interviews are either, the mechanics of the interviews really get you to a place where you can go quickly through the interview. But to go proficiently into the depth of problem solving inside the interview, it's much trickier to self-assess. And so some amount of variety in the cases that you do, and certainly external feedback when somebody says, yes, you're ready, or no, you're not, is a really great way to assess that. Now, the third thing that we're getting a lot this year is, what does hypothesis driven mean? The firms all say hypothesis driven. Does that mean I put my hypothesis before my structure or after my structure? And I'm going to tell you, it actually doesn't even mean that at all. Being hypothesis driven means that you're being action oriented, tying data to action in every piece of the case. There are definitely mechanics that we're going to talk about with structuring, and there are definitely mechanics that we're going to talk about with math in this session. Other than those three questions, what are your questions? Pop them in the chat or just come off of mute. This is a small enough group. I'm assuming almost all MBAs. If you're spectators, you're very welcome. But the call today is very focused on this like short sprint MBA recruitment process. So if you have other questions, ask them. I want to make sure I tailor the rest of the session to them.
So I'm getting some of the chat here. I'll just read them out.
Thanks.
The difference between interviewing for Big Four versus in-house consulting. Okay.
Cool.
Great. Love it. We've also got the floor open here for you to just unmute, and we'd love to hear your voices and see your smiling faces.
I'll give you I'll give you two big differences between Big Four and in-house while people are thinking about questions. But again, like I didn't put this in the slides. I'm super glad that you asked me. It's a great question. Number one, the question underneath the question might be, when do I start to tailor my prep? And the answer is later. You are not there yet. In the last week before your interview, there are two things that you need to make sure of when you're switching between a Big Four and an in-house interview. Number one, for the in-house interview, they want you for a long time. These are not stepping stone jobs. They want to know that you love the industry. So you need to do a deep dive on the company, on their strategic efforts, on some key people inside the company, on the work of the group, on some of their core growth initiatives. And you need to have a perspective about those, because not only will you likely be tested on those inside your fit interview, but also they're more likely to come up inside the case. So if you're doing an Amex or a GE or a Capital One interview, understanding how they make money and how they're likely to make money over the next 5 years is going to be a really, really core, important part of the process. Also, the in-house organizations don't train you. Like they train you very little. It's mostly an apprenticeship job. So talking a lot about how you like to work with people and being a self-structurer, I think that's really, really important for the in-house organizations. For Big Four, you have to demonstrate a passion for variety. So that needs to come through in both your fit stories and also in the way that you engage with every single problem. So in the last couple of days before your interview, if you're prepping for Big Four, you need to focus on industry variety in the cases that you're doing, because you need to be ready to talk about a big variety of problems. Their enthusiasm for that is a big hallmark of Big Four cases. The structure, similar. The math, similar. The creative brainstorming, super similar. All of those things, the elements of the case are going to be very consistent across the two. But your fit and then also your enthusiasm about different types of problems and industry-specific problems is really where it's going to come through. But
we've got
final caveat here, Jay. There is like one thing that we see a lot, which is that people try to game the system. Now that y'all know, a lot of you, what your interviews are, like you start prepping for Big Four interviews now, that's a huge mistake. You need to be a great caser by the end of the month. You need to prep for Big Four interviews in the first week of January. And differentiating between the two of those will enable you to have more flexible, more robust business conversations in every setting. Go ahead, Natalia. I'd love to hear your question.
Yes, I actually posted a question because I'm having an interview for BASF.
Yeah.
And I was really curious on what is the difference and what is the case specifics. And by the way, sorry for my appearances. It's 1 a.m. in Serbia, so it's no not
worries.
Official.
Which geography for BASF?
Germany.
Great. What I would do is go through two things. So, Jay, you would probably actually be able to tell me if we have a BASF case interview on the site. If we don't, go through the profiles, Natalia, of the leaders of the strategic organization, right? Because
Yeah.
Like if a Bain person comes in, guess what kind of cases they do? Bain cases,
Okay.
right? And so like we literally last week we were in Denver with a group from DaVita, and they're led by a Bain organization. Guess what kind of flavor their internal strategy organization has, right? It's a Bain case. So that's like if you want to game it a little bit, that's the key thing. But for any corporate like that for BAS, you need to be ready for a standard. Like I'm going to walk you through the structuring. I'm going to walk you through the math problems. Corporates reserve the right to simplify the case into a business conversation. Okay. And so what I mean by that is that they ask you a series of open-ended questions to which you will reply with kind of off the cuff structure, but you're not pausing and taking a bunch of time. You're not formalizing the case process. You're just engaging in an active analytical business conversation. This is very similar to the way that a BCG case operates, where you're taking a lot of initiative and you're working through the process. So I'm going to emphasize the same point that I already made, which is like basically now through the end of the month, you are really going to focus on having an active and open, just regular business conversation structured in the 5 parts of a case, right? And you're going to do that for multiple different industries, not just the ones that BASF touches. But then you're going to go through BASF and you're going to be like, do I understand their businesses? Do I understand how they make money? I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive on that. And do I have a perspective about what I think they should do to improve the business over time? Those are the things that will help you prepare for the likely business conversations you'll have in those kind of interviews.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Is your dream job to work in the sports industry? The Farrell Sports Business Podcast takes you there. I'm Matt Farrell, sports marketing consultant, sports technology CEO, and podcast host. I talk with sports media, executive recruiters, athletes, agents, marketers, TV execs, PR pros, and CEOs. Tune into a special podcast episode where I review the top sports business podcasts out there for you. Find the Farrell Sports Business Podcast on YouTube and in all of your favorite podcasty places.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lots of useful information there.
Good.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So can you help me understand that based on the team that we are interviewing for, like how do we decide what kind of cases we should be practicing? Because I am interviewing for the supply chain, so under performance improvement, the supply chain team at Bain, and I just want some clarity in terms of should I just be focusing on operation focused cases versus do I need to like maintain a variety or any insights around that?
Yeah. So first 10 cases, no. I want you to be able to do any kind of case. Let's see here, Javith. Were we smart enough to put all of our case types in here? I'm not even sure if we were. Let me hold on. Let me go see if I can find them in another deck. I'm going to show you the 10 case types that you should be doing. In fact, I'm going to show you this slide before I do that, because in our case library, we've actually categorized the cases by these 10 different types of business problems. So there are 4 profitability problems, there are 3 market study problems, 2 M&A problems, and market sizing problems. All the 10 of those are the ones that you need to know when you're walking into any interview at Bain, right? Like they would expect that if I ask you an M&A case, you're ready to talk M&A. That's what I would consider to be the baseline. You have to be ready for any of those types of cases. I would want you to be familiar with the structures for all of those types of cases. And that's true whether you're interviewing for that group at Bain, another group at Bain, or a group anywhere. That's just case 101, right? And a lot of people that game the system too early miss out on that round business education. You need to be able to solve business problems, period. Doesn't matter which ones they are. Then, as you're moving into phase 2 of the case prep process, then we want you to really accelerate toward those more detailed types of questions. And so then, yes, you can absolutely focus on supply chain questions, but you can't do one or the other. You can't do one at the expense of the other.
All right.
Jada, let me see if I can find that other slide. Okay.
Yeah, sounds great.
I feel like I can. I've got it at my fingertips right here.
I'll just read off a couple of other questions that I've been getting in via private message here. Best practices of closing a case. So that's number 1. I think that's a great question.
Yeah.
We've got someone from a non-target school who is not experiencing success in landing interviews. So that's a little bit of a different conversation. But so we've got tons of resources. I can maybe send some your way on kind of the networking process, and right, it comes down to networking and your resume for the most part. So if I had to guess, I'd say that's where there can be some room for improvement. But I'll get you some
Big
resources
time.
for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Jay. I'm gonna just go to this slide. I found it.
Great.
So well done, y'all, on co-creating this with me. And we'll just share this. These are the 10 business types. So, based on the last question that we had, I'll come back to this in just a second. But basically, I care like almost zero about the industries that you cover, although I do think that it's helpful to cover a lot of the basic ones. Like you should cover pharma and healthcare, you should cover consumer products, you should cover energy, you should cover tech, like you should cover, logistics, right? And like you should cover some of those core areas. It's also helpful to cover practice areas, things like supply chain, for example, things like, business process optimization, things like sales enhancement. Absolutely, those are also helpful. But if you do the 10 of these business problems, I think you are a great problem solver. And I find that a lot of people try to go too fast into the deep end. And then when I ask you to do something simple, you're functionally not able to do it. I was just sharing this before. In our case library, one of the things we have over 500 cases. In the case library, we have categorized them by these specific areas. We also have prep plans. And Japheth, if you want to tag one of our prep plans in the chat, if you all have not gotten one of these yet, but a lot of what I'm talking about today is the why behind how we built the prep plan. I built it personally based on this 15,000 points of data that we've had about what people need to get into the interview. And I'm not 100% ready, but I'm 98% ready to say, I can guarantee you that if you do everything in the prep plan the way that I ask you to, you're going to pass the first round. The second round requires still a little bit of extra special sauce, but you're not going to fail the first round if you walk through those steps. So if you just are the person who likes to, like a lot of you are going to ask today about shortcuts. I'm always worried when you do that. I think it means you're smart, but I also worry that it means that you're going to shortcut the thing that actually would help you complete the prep appropriately. As Japheth mentioned, we also do private coaching. Happy to share any more about that. And then this MBA focused cohort. And then I'm going to talk today really from the MBB perspective, recognizing that a lot of you are going to be interviewing with Big Four boutiques, corporates, and more. Ask any of the firms, right? Ask any of the firms. We will do everything that we can to share exactly what we know. And if we don't know exactly, we'll share directionally what you know, or Japheth can share resources inside the chat as well. Japheth, I feel I'm getting librarian vibes off of you today. I think that's what this is going to look like.
Calling, found it.
Are you ready to land your dream consulting or corporate strategy job? On the Management Consulted Job Board, we've made it easier than ever. Create your free job search profile today and instantly unlock access to hundreds of top-tier job opportunities, all at no cost to you. Want to stand out even more? Premium users through our Black Belt program get the ultimate edge by being featured in an exclusive resume book shared directly with top consulting firms like Huron, Simon Kucher, LEK, and more. So why wait? Start your journey toward your dream career now through the Management Consulted Job Board. Your future in consulting is just a click away. Find the link to create your profile today in the show notes below.
Awesome. Okay, so let's dive in. The agenda for today is actually, we're going to kick off by just talking about how we use market sizing counterintuitively. Market sizing is a really important part of our prep. We over-index on it. When we talk to schools, they say we don't want to do market sizing. Our students already know how to do market sizing. We're like, yeah, that's fine. We'll see. We do a market sizing with people. You all just whiff it, right? And so here's the cold hard truth, especially for those of you that are interviewing with McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. If you can't do market sizing, you're not ready for cases. So we often have people come to us and they say, I'm having a hard time with structure. I'm like, great, let's do a market sizing case. They come and they say, I'm having a hard time with math. I'm like, awesome, let's do a market sizing case. I can solve for a large portion of the problems inside a case with market sizing. Can't get you all the way there, but I can definitely help untangle some of your pain points with market sizing. Then we're going to talk about drills. How do you do math drills? How do you do structure drills? Why are drills more valuable from a quality perspective than just actually repping cases for quantity. We found a really odd data point a couple of years ago that has informed this approach for us, which is that people who did under 10 cases almost never succeeded. People who did over 40 cases also almost never succeeded, although they had a higher success rate than the under 10, but the highest success rate was 11 to 39 cases. That was a little mind-blowing to us, because we really have seen in the market that a lot of people feel like the more cases you do, the better. What we hypothesized, which I think has definitely been true in the way that we've incorporated it in our programs, is that when you go deep on understanding why you're doing something inside the case, you have more authentic, articulate, and exciting business conversations with the people that you're interviewing with. And that is what moves the needle even more than just perfect prose. Third are some checkpoints to hit between now and interviews. I'll share some details on this. One of the first things I want to talk about is hypotheses, the open hypothesis versus the closed hypothesis. Common question that we get: how do you use a hypothesis? What is a hypothesis-driven approach? I was with CBS on Saturday. This was one of the big questions. And we throughout the whole 3 hours, we kept talking about how you use this hypothesis-driven approach appropriately. Number one, you don't say the hypothesis before your structure. So, but your hypothesis informs absolutely everything. Before you ask a clarifying question, you formulate a hypothesis in your mind. When you are building your structure, it is to the point of a likely hypothesis. You articulate your hypothesis at the end of a structure, and every time you do math, you hypothesize why that math is going to solve for or contradict your actual original hypothesis that you developed. The hypothesis comes in at the closing because you state whether or not the thing that you thought was important was important. It's a way for you to reinforce, if you were right, that you had good judgment at the beginning. It's a way for you to identify open-mindedness if you were wrong. But a hypothesis-driven approach comes under two kinds of hypotheses, and this is where a lot of confusion comes in, so I just wanted to clear it up for you. If a case involves diagnosing a problem and then coming up with a solution, we call that case a case that demands an open hypothesis. If a case has a yes or no question at its fundamental core, should we do A or B? Should we enter this market? Yes or no? Should we buy this company? Yes or no? Those kinds of cases lend themselves to what we call a closed hypothesis. A closed hypothesis is where you actually state at the end of your structure what you believe the data that you collect will inform you that the answer will be. It is an actual yes or no line in the sand right at the beginning of the case. And if you're interviewing with Bain's Private Equity Group, let me tell you, then it is essential that you walk into that conversation ready to take a point of view and to defend it with the hypothetical data that you start with and the real data that you gather throughout the case. This open and closed hypothesis, every case has an open hypothesis. An open hypothesis is where you believe you should start, where your focus areas are going to be inside the case. So in profit decline, for example, you might say, I'm going to start with pricing. My hypothesis is that we are underpricing or we are over discounting. And then you would kind of go into the data that you would look for there. But that will, again, come at the end of your structuring process. So it's really important that you understand kind of these core frameworks, but more importantly, the core business problems, and feel equipped to solve them. Because we walk through a process that really moves you from the left of the scale at market sizing to the right at M&A, which we believe to be an appropriate proxy for complexity as you go through. I'm going to walk you through the three pieces: market sizing, structuring, and then finally going through the math, which are core parts of our prep. It's really valuable when you start your prep with market sizing. Market sizing can be a part of your round one interviews, although that's not actually why we practice it. And again, if you want to skip something, don't skip this, because if you're good at market sizing, it's going to flow through to the rest of the cases. But you don't practice this because you want to be good at it in interviews. You want to practice it because you want to know how to solve ambiguous problems, how to talk through your thoughts, how to drive math and analytics, how to drive action from your numbers. Market sizing embodies every skill that you need later in a case: structure, developing and defending assumptions, identifying calculations and conducting them on the fly out loud, and delivering insights related to those. A lot of people that have basic market sizing have limited structure. It's not detailed enough. They defend their assumptions weakly, not thoughtfully. They go through the calculations poorly, or they simplify them to the point that they're not actually capable of doing the complex ones. And they don't drive a business insight. They're like, here's a number, 100 million. I didn't care. That's not why I brought you in. I could have asked ChatGPT for the number. I want the insight. Should we go into the market? Which segment of the market should we go into? Is it growing? Do you think it's going to be successful? I'm looking for a business extrapolation on top of the other issues. We recommend that you start with a minimum of 10 market sizing cases. And for those of you that are at non-core schools, if you're going to a top firm, a Big Four, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, like you can expect that sometimes even recruiters will give you these kinds of questions. I'm going to walk through a quick market sizing question with y'all to test it out a little bit, and just so that you can kind of assess where you are. But I want to ask if you've got questions about market sizing before I do that. Just for a teaching exercise, I'm going to have y'all size the market for dishwashers in Canada. Grab a piece of paper. I got 2 minutes on the clock. I'm going to quiz you afterwards, and we're going to see whether you're ready for these or not. Erika, I will go through that exact answer in just a minute. That's exactly why I'm bringing these kinds of questions up.
Hey, Jeff here, quickly popping back in to encourage you to grab a pencil and paper and follow along with this market sizing question. So set a 2-minute timer and see if you can size the market for dishwashers in Canada. And then Jenny Ray will explain the thinking behind this, how to solve this, and more.
Okay, that's 2 minutes. I'm going to pop up a poll. And I want you to take a point of view on this one. I also want you to assess whether this was the first thing that you thought of with market sizing. Because if the first thing that you thought of is what's the population of Canada, then you're not taking a hypothesis-driven approach to cases. If the first thing that you thought of is this is how I'm going to break down a market sizing case, and this is going to be the most important factor for dishwashers in Canada, then you're taking a hypothesis-driven approach. So a lot of people don't think about the overarching structure or the measurement inside the case, and therefore it's really difficult to think about the bigger picture. I don't know if you can y'all see the answers as they're coming in.
I think
We've got
you'll have to
great
end
answers.
and share it.
Okay, I was just curious because it's very interesting. Good. Just about 5 more seconds and I'll close it up. Okay, love this. So first of all, love that 72% of you, which is higher than the informational polls that we asked earlier, weighed in on this. Like, this is what I think the expected way is to size the market. There is absolutely a right answer here, but the most important thing that I'm assessing here is whether you had a point of view and you were ready to share that at this type of question. That's part of what market sizing tests for you. However, the right answer is revenue per year. 16% of you said that. So it was our third most popular answer. If you didn't come up with revenue per year, you're not thinking enough about how businesses are evaluating issues. So again, there are some things that's just like, hey, we need you to think and talk like this is expected information inside cases. And you can't necessarily get that unless you're practicing with super high quality people, right? You're going to get better at cases at a baseline, but you're not necessarily going to get good enough for the types of roles that you really want. The potential buyers is a common question for marketing firms, but still they need to assess how much money can we make every year. Potential buyers units per year, and total revenue are all on the way to revenue per year, which is the most comprehensive structure here. Let me just lay down our kind of market sizing test. Market sizing tests both structure and math. I was looking from you for a prompt that had 5 or more steps. So I'd love for you, I can't see your actual numbers, but I'd love for you to tell me how many steps you put. So if you're like, I couldn't come up with an answer, I was still thinking about it. That's problematic, right? I could have told you if I were interviewing one-on-one with you that you're not ready for interviews. If you came up with over 5 steps and you didn't come up with an answer, you're not ready for interviews. I need answers and action. But if you are the kind of person who came up with 4 to 5 steps, a pretty robust structure, and especially gold star, if you did step number 2 here, break it into 3 or 4 segments. Segmentation is the magic behind these kinds of questions. Segmentation is where we get detail and interest. But I'm testing a ton of stuff in market sizing questions. And so if this is something that you've slept on, you haven't done it, you don't think you're going to have to do it in the interview. I mean, you can still not believe me, but I would really highly encourage you to go through 2 of these market sizing questions every time you do them. You don't necessarily have to do them every day, but you do have to do 2 each time you do them. Why? Because when you do 1, you break the ice. When you do 2, you make incremental gains. You make faster progress every time you do 2 things back to back. That's actually true for drills. That's also true for full cases. If you do 2 full cases in a day, it's more like your actual interview round, and you make incremental progress a lot faster than if you just kind of like wander into a case on a Tuesday and then wander back into one on Friday. Market sizing also teaches a core basic that comes up in almost every case, which is customer segmentation. There are really 5 core ways you can segment your customers, and most cases are simple enough that you don't go through the process. Here, I can share this. By the way, the market sizing steps. When you're inside a case, you do not go through the process of micro-segmenting. So you don't take like age and income. You don't come up with like 30 to 40-year-old middle income women. You just are like, look, I think age is the best proxy for how often people buy and how much they're willing to spend. Income, same thing. Geography, same thing. So you're going to select one of these forms of customer segmentation in every market sizing case. And as you do that, you're going to become familiar with the way that segmentations work, which is going to be a skill built for the rest of cases. And then somebody asked earlier, what do you need to know? Here's what you need to know for every case, but market sizing tests it as well. You need to know the US population, 320 million as of the last census. You need to know the population of the city that you live in, right? So if it's London, or if it's Frankfurt, or if it's New York, or if it's Chicago, like you need to know the population of that city. Why? Because I will think that you've been living under a rock if you've been living there for 4 months and you didn't kind of just get a sense of how big it is. Some of you came from international places. I've heard people way overestimate New York. I've heard people way underestimate a lot of cities. The population of any city that you're interviewing for. You say you want to work in Boston, you better know how big Boston is. You say you want to work in Dallas, you better know how big Dallas is. And the population of 2 countries per continent. Why? Well, if you knew the US, you might be able to kind of, approximate Canada, which, by the way, does anybody want to pop in the chat what the population of Canada is? Yeah. It's small, right? It's small. Like a lot of you are probably like 100 million. That's a nice round number. Half the US, it's 150, 160 million. And so, yeah, as of I think the last Canadian census, it was just over 40 million. Somebody can fact check that for me, but it's smaller than you think, but still you could say like, hey, relative to the US. When you say Serbia, for example, Natalia, is right relative to the US, people are going to get it so super wrong. But if you had like Serbia versus Poland, you would get most likely a lot closer, right? Or Serbia versus France. So like approximating things that are regionally relative is super helpful. If you know Ethiopia and Kenya, South Africa should be easier for you to size. Same in Asia, same in Latin America. So you want to just know 2 countries per continent. Those become some of your gold stars to size everything else off of. And it kind of just adds a little bit of color when you're justifying the numbers. Questions about market sizing before I move on to the next type of prompt, which are drill-based prompts.
Could you go through how you would answer the dishwasher question?
I should have known that somebody was going to ask that. Let me move on. But then here's what I'll do. I'll come back to it. I mean, I actually didn't write it down, so I'd have to take 2 minutes to build it. I can tell you a couple of the elements if that would be helpful. Would that be helpful just to walk you through some of the way that I would think about it?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, no matter what, you start with population, right? So I would start with the population of Canada, and I would have estimated probably 30 or 40 million. I actually know randomly, I know the population of Australia, which is also surprisingly small for land mass, which is about 30 million. So I probably would have estimated that Canada with more populous cities is a little bit bigger. I would have broken that up into households. I know that there are a number of Canadian families that have multiple generations in households. So I probably would have estimated 4 people per household. And I would have also acknowledged at the very beginning that there are also businesses that have dishwashers, but I would have lumped that into my extra bonus percentage at the end. So I didn't have to dual track the way that I would think about it. And I would have said, look, I think that while there are businesses like restaurants and offices and other places that will have these, they're going to be a much lower volume than our household numbers. So I'm going to pick households as our core segment. Breaking it into the segments, if you go to this page, I think that income is a super reasonable way to think about how often people replace a dishwasher, whether they have a dishwasher in the first place, and also what they're willing to spend on a dishwasher, right? I've very rarely been into like lower priced income rental homes that have like Bosch dishwashers, for example. So you're going to see a difference in those things. So I think income is a fair proxy here. I also like geography, right? The size of your kitchen. When I lived in New York City, when I was in B school, I mean, an urban kitchen, my urban kitchen didn't have a dishwasher. Like age, maybe, but you're looking at household, so age becomes a little bit more difficult. Same with gender. Needs might be like how often you cook. I think that could be interesting, but income and geography to me are two of the natural ones. I would have picked, like I mentioned, income, broken it into 3 segments: upper, middle, lower income, approximated the percentages of each one of those. Usually middle is going to be the largest, lower is going to be the second largest, and upper is going to be the highest in a developed economy. And then percentage who own, I would have approximated for each percentage of those households, how many of each of them would own a dishwasher. I never approximate 100%, and I never approximate 0%, but it probably would have been something on the order of like 90% plus for the upper income, something like 75 to 80 for middle, and something like 40 to 50 for lower income. And then frequency of purchase, I would have estimated a higher frequency of purchase, a repurchase rate that was more rapid for the higher income properties, based on their willingness to pay, the fact that they are more likely to redesign their kitchens, et cetera. I would have probably caveated that some of the lower income might also be prone to higher replacement rates because they're likely also less valuable dishwashers. So maybe they will be more likely to break. But I would have kind of scaled it highest to lowest there. And then average price, absolutely highest to lowest. And then for the additional segments at the end, I would have added a bonus bump here, probably somewhere around 10 to 20%. I think it's fairly material, right? Restaurants, hotels, dorms that would have dishwashers. So factoring into that as well, I think would have made sense to bump up the numbers at the end.
Thank you.
Is that weird? Yeah.
Yeah.
Questions about that? Here's the only thing I'm going to say. I would have been 100% wrong. Like my number would not be the right number, just so y'all know. I want to make sure that you recognize that your desire to hire me or not, their desire, the firm's desire to hire you or not, is not based on accuracy, right? It's based on defendability. Can you defend the relative nature of your numbers? But you will probably be too high or probably be too low. Getting it right on the money is not even what you would need to do. And I could absolutely evaluate somebody doing this problem without ever having looked up the answer or calculated the answer on my own. I'm testing your ability to structure analytics here more than to actually complete the numbers. You do have to do the math though, yes. I'm just going to get myself out of it just for today, so I can move on to other good stuff. Cool. Let's talk about the next thing. Case method drills is one of the big unlocks that we have. I really strongly believe that you can do like 3 to 5 total cases and basically piece out the parts of a case and become really successful at casing. And 3 to 5 total might seem like a little bit of a shock, but we have multiple coaches on our team that did exactly that. Like they did one case, they were terrible. They figured out that why they were terrible was because they were really bad at math. And so they did like 25 math reps. And then they came back and they did another case and they were all of a sudden, they could tie the case really well together. And so, like, I'm not saying in aggregate, the time that you spend would be 3 to 4 cases. It's going to be longer than that, but doing drills is really valuable. So for market sizing questions, I already mentioned this, right? 2 per day, up to 10 is a great start. At 10 to 20, do 2 with a partner. So again, 2 back to back, have them give you the numbers, walk through it. It'll be fun. It'll be a little bit of a surprise. You'll walk through the structure. It's going to be super duper helpful. Second piece is doing 10 cases twice. And so running cases with a timer, and that's the 10 cases that I talked about earlier. So those are the kind of structure pieces here. I would recommend that you do 10 of these cases once through out loud with a partner. We have level 1 and level 2 cases. In the case prep plan, we actually walk you through one of each of the level 1 cases. So that's the proxy for doing exactly that. Walk through each one of them. Level 1 is for a round 1 interview. Level 1 has a minimum of 1 math and a minimum of 1 creative question, but usually not more than that. So usually in second round interviews, you're going to see 2 to 3 math questions and 2 or 3 creative questions as well that kind of stack together and more robustly answer the question. They assume that some of you are going to be too slow in the first round, that they don't usually pack more into the case. Then getting together with a partner and asking them to push you, reading and drilling to fix mistakes for structure, math, and business concepts, and then putting it back together. So I would actually just walk you through how doing personal structure drills can work. You can absolutely do these with a coach. In fact, if you work with our coaches, they're probably going to tell you that your structure is not good enough and you should do a structure drill session. But some of you are going to be dead in the water and some of you could just have improvement in your structure drills. Either way, this process would absolutely work. First, you need to structure under time pressure. Our structuring process at Management Consulted is called a 4x3. It's where you have four different categories of data or information. And then underneath those data points, you have 3 supporting data concepts that you are using to basically say, if we're looking at customers, here are 3 data points about customers that I would love to know in order to solve this problem. Our recommended structure to actually walk through this verbally is when you walk through all 4 of the pieces and you say, awesome, I've got 4 categories, 1, 2, 3, and 4. In category number 1, I have 3 data points, 1, 2, and 3. The reason I want to look at category 1 is the following. Then moving on to category 2, we have 3 data points, 1, 2, and 3. You're basically listing out the data and then explaining the concept. So you're not belaboring each data point. It moves through it more quickly, more executive presence. You're focused more on getting to the action, and you're also moving into the rest of the case later, which gives you more time to solve and do math. We have on the Management Consulted platform video drills. If you're already at a partner school, you have access to these. They are out loud and timed, where we read out a prompt to you. These are phenomenal ways for you to test yourself under pressure. Okay. However, once you have done the first structure under pressure, which is how you would do it in a case if you had to case today, the second thing that you should do is structure for optimal content, right? So somebody comes back and they're like, crap, in 2 minutes, I didn't get a 4x3 structure. I got a 3x2 structure. What I say is that instead of trying to cram yourself into doing structures quickly all the time, you need to take unlimited time to redo that same structure. Without a time limit, you start from scratch and you complete a complete optimal 4x3 structure. In fact, if you're doing these off of the case library, not off of our drills, you can actually go into the case later and figure out what math did they ask you. Did it show up in your structure? It's a great test of whether or not your structure was strong. What was the answer at the end? Would your structure have gotten you to that answer? If you are identifying gaps in what you're doing, then that's a kind of core issue. If you don't know what an optimal structure looks like, you need to work with somebody. You have to work with a second year or with a coach in order for them to tell you what an optimal structure looks like. Finally, you're going to go back at the end of your optimal structure and you're going to flip the page over to a blank page. And you're going to start the timer again, and you're going to listen to the prompt, and you're going to go through the exercise of doing a 2-minute 4x3 structure. You might not remember everything from the optimal structure, but you're going to get the combination of great quality structures delivered very quickly. 2 minutes to write it down, 2 minutes to deliver it out loud. I can tell by the end of a structure whether somebody's going to succeed in the case, because the confidence with which they run through it in 2 minutes, or they run through it in a minute and then over elaborate, which demonstrates an actual lack of confidence, or another kind of variety of a mishap in the structure, can be an absolute death knell inside the cases. Questions about structuring before I move on to math?
I have one general question. Do you have a peer group where we can actually practice together before we get to the coaches, so that we have some sort of a base before we start working with somebody who knows stuff?
Yeah, we have one for black belt. And so all of the black belts are in a group, and case partners are both you kind of in the wild, we pop you into the chat for the community and you can find a case partner, or actually Caleb, who is our community manager, can help facilitate that. If he's like, I know what time zone you're in, I know what you're looking for. Also, we have a kickoff call on Wednesday, so you can meet everybody when you're there. And so you can find people that are kind of going through a similar program. If you're not doing Black Belt, if you're a member of one of our partner schools, we do have a university community where you can functionally find case partners. It's a little like more DIY, but absolutely possible. So yeah, those are two really great ways to find good, well-trained partners, similar methodology, like similar level of intensity, right?
Okay, awesome.
Great question. Let's talk about math. So there's really two pieces of math. Case math at the core tests both timing and capabilities, right? And so when people say I'm bad at math, I always come back and I say, what part of math are you bad at? And if they can't answer me, I know that they probably haven't broken up the math into the 4 key pieces. So the 4 key pieces of math are, first of all, gathering the data. Some of you are not bad at math, you're bad at listening. Some of you have second languages that you're also contending with. So you have to practice more just to internalize the information quickly enough, right? We get it. We've seen it hundreds of times. It's no issue. But being able to identify what you're solving for and then the data that you need is important in the recap. For the structure, you're going to pre-explain your algebraic approach to solve the problem, and you're going to ask for any missing data. Pre-explaining the algebraic approach helps you identify whether you got all the data in the background or whether you need to ask for specific information. A lot of people kind of go straight from the recap into the solve, and it sounds like data soup. You're just kind of like, here, we're going to just like start calculating random numbers together. And by the end, I ask you like, why did you calculate that? And you can't tell me. You just got excited / nervous and you just started calculating, right? So adding a structure piece where you explain, this is what I'm about to do. And the best candidates, the one who get the MBB offers, actually tell me, I think that the middle income segment is going to be our most valuable for dishwashers in Canada. Let's run the math to see if we can verify that. Then the third piece is to talk the interviewer through each calculation and sense check your numbers along the way, as well as come up with an answer. And then the fourth piece, insights, I have another slide for, but I just want to say here, in total, the case math portion will be about 5 minutes, and the insight should be the final minute of your case math. They don't time you, like you aren't under a timer inside the actual interview. We time you when we're coaching you though, because we can often tell you whether you're too fast or too slow. And having that objective point of view about how quickly you're moving through this can be really valuable. You can also do that when you're partnering with people. Using all 3 insight levels is imperative for MBB. Level 1 is here's what the numbers say. Right. So let's say in my last dishwasher example, I would say the middle income segment is the largest and the total market is $285 million per year. Right. The largest driver is the replacement rate in the middle income section. Now, based on this, what the client should do is think about targeting their marketing toward middle income families. They should be picturing middle income houses. They should be picturing a lifestyle of middle income families inside their marketing. And we should do a evaluation of a couple of key competitors inside the space. What we should do next is we should identify what the price point is for the costs, so we can ensure that at the price point that we're going to target with the marketing budget that we'll need, we can make a profit in the sector. That's how you work through all 3 levels of the math. And again, at the MBB level, you have to do all 3. Like not doing all 3 just means that you're not going to get the offer. I mentioned earlier the case type planning that we talked about, right? The market sizing, 10 of those ideally at the beginning, profitability level 1, market study level 1, and M&A level 1, and then moving on to level 2 cases, which are for round 2. I would like for you to be ready for round 2 before you walk into round 1, right? So I'd love to see you actually accomplish the confidence to work through those cases. Then a lot of people that we work with do almost no casing between round 1 and round 2. They do a few drills. They do a ton of fit stories, but they don't do as much casing between round 1 and round 2. And then finally, creative or advanced questions, working through those. Those kinds of questions are like, how should we colonize Mars? right? They're very open-ended. They don't involve the core levels of structures or math. They really involve you having a robust, analytical, but structured and clear business conversation with the person who you're working with. In addition, some checkpoints between now and interviews. So by December 15th, we would love to see you have done 10 market sizing cases and 5 full cases out loud, but with a partner. By December 28th, we'd love to see you master core frameworks, 10 or more structure drills, blend frameworks to showcase business acumen by using 10 total level 1 cases, and practice your fit stories. We recommend that you write 15 fit stories to prep for your interviews. A lot of people come in underprepared for fit. And one of those pieces of being prepared is just to be able to say, I was actually great in this environment. Oh, this other one, I was also great there. Here's a third environment, I was great in that situation. By the interviews, we would expect that you would have done around 10 level 2 cases. You'd be under 20 seconds and accurate on each mental math calculation. You'd be structured in your creative brainstorming and comfortable with charts, graphs, and more. What questions do y'all have before I move to the final slide and wrap up the session? The fit stories, the question was, how long should the fit stories be? 1 minute. Like, executive presence is rapidly delivered stories. If they want more information, they'll ask you for it, but don't bore them by going into too much detail. You need to think about the ideal executive version as if you were talking to somebody who had a tremendously low attention span.
May I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
So I don't know if this is just because I haven't done enough cases, but how do you get better at asking clarifying questions at the start?
So good. Let's see. Did I put these in here? I didn't even ask. I didn't even put clarifying questions in. Okay, I'm going to voice over this. I have a framework for it, and that helps me a lot because I'm in the moment. I don't always remember. I ask 3 things, and I ask them in this order. The first type of question is, did I miss anything? So if I'm like, I didn't get that piece of data, or I didn't understand what that piece of data meant, then I'll ask that question at the beginning, right? So question number 1 is always like, here's what I missed. Question number 2, which I think are the most important and valuable and highest quality questions, are questions about the business model of the company. So give me an example of a case that you've done, for example. I'll tell you a clarifying question that we might have asked there.
I did an M&A case where a company acquire, like, obviously acquire the other company.
Mm-hmm. But what kind of companies and what kind of issues?
I have to pull up the case. 1 second.
Okay. While he's doing that, I'm just going to move over to the last slide. If y'all want to join us for Black Belt, we would love you to do it. You can absolutely do this without Black Belt. But the later that you're starting and the more that you want it, I'd really encourage you to make what is relatively a pretty small investment compared to an MBA.
So it was a private equity company, client looking to purchase this small company that makes paintball guns.
Great. Okay, awesome. So one of the first questions I would have asked is, do they make paintball guns under one brand, or do they make them as a manufacturer for multiple different branded companies? You're trying to quickly identify who the customers are, right? What the products might be. If there was a geographical question, like if they didn't state it in the background, you might say, the private equity company is in the United States. I'm going to assume that we're going to focus this on US marketing and sales. Is there an international presence that I should also factor in? Right? Like anything that's kind of really focused on the tactics of how the company makes money, who their customers are, what their core channels are that they sell through, where their geographies are, et cetera. Those are really valuable. The third type of question is questions on the case objective. So for example, in private equity cases, it's really great to just verify. Usually a PE firm is looking for a 5-year or under exit. And they're looking for multiple generation, and they're not planning to utilize synergies. So just verifying those things can be super helpful. But using that framework has helped me so much, because I walk through, did I miss something? sometimes I do, a lot of times I don't. So it's not a mandatory question. The second one, having a conversation about the business. Let me understand how they operate, who they sell to. You're not asking for data. You're not asking what percentage of their customers are X. You're just like, do they sell to this type of business? This is how I'm thinking about it. And it just demonstrates your ability to have a business conversation on the fly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That helps a
Yeah.
lot.
Jenny, can I ask a follow-up question on that?
Yeah. Sure.
So can you also help me understand that what are some non-traditional clarification questions? I was doing a case recently, which was about, that the governor is trying to, bring up the students' performance in the district school, something like that. And then
Yeah.
we went on the case, and towards the end, the case told me that you did not ask me that because the governor is there, how far is the election? So he said that will have like a big part of, you forgot this entire thing in the framework around his business political tactics, that, because the election is coming. And so whatever, whatever strategy you come up with, it has to, show results sooner than later. And you forgot about that entire thing in the case. So, I mean, I could have never thought about it. I have to ask that, okay, because the client is a governor, then, how far is the next election? So, like, do you have something around that, how to pick up these non-traditional clarification questions?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that every like business objective, the third type of clarification question is really about understanding how you're going to measure success. So that type of question potentially could have come up if you were like, I'm trying to think about what would make a project like this successful for the governor. And then maybe you identify like, it would probably be improvement. And when I think about a governor, he doesn't have a profit motive, but maybe either his party wants to remain in power, or he wants to run for another office. Maybe he wants to rerun for this office. Can you tell me a little bit more about where we are in the political process? Right. But you're kind of like, if you identify how they're going to measure success, that sometimes will tease out those types of questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will bring that in my clarifications. And also, can you talk a little about brainstorming, structured brainstorming? Because like, you don't get a lot of time to, really think about it. So you don't have as many ideas, and, you don't have enough time to really start bucketing them at the very moment. Can you talk a
I'll
little
tell you
about
how
that?
I do it. I think of my first idea as a category, like whatever comes to my mind first. What I don't worry about in structured brainstorming is prioritizing on the fly. I don't think you can functionally, at least I'm certainly not smart enough to. So I just think like, hey, if you ask me for 3, ways that you could work with schools to get them excited about this process, I'd say, awesome. The first thing that I think about is senior leadership at the schools. First thing that came to my mind, right? And then I go through and I think through how I would measure that. I'd like to identify how many senior leaders there are of core schools. I'd like to identify how many of them are in underperforming schools across these metrics. And I would like to identify how many of them are tenured versus non-tenured. So you kind of like go deep into one category, and that usually brings you a little bit of time where you can come back to maybe a second idea. The second thing that I like to look at is the technological foundation of the school's reporting systems. And then you go through a couple of ideas for that.
So unlike framework, you're saying that in brainstorming, I don't have to talk about my buckets first. I can start talking about one thing, and then I can start talking about the other one.
I absolutely do that. And I think it's totally fine. What you do at the end, so when you're walking through your initial structure and you take some time to build it, you walk me through what you wrote down on your paper. I've got 4 categories, 1, 2, 3, 4. Category 1 is this. Here's some support. When you're doing it in brainstorming, you say, here's my first category. Here are a few data points. And then at the end, you say, so in summary, I have 3 categories and 9 total data points that I would want to look at in order to solve this problem. So you summarize the total structure so that they can see that it was there if they weren't able to capture it as you were walking through it.
Yeah, this is very helpful. Thank you.
One last thing about that, it's really helpful to use very clear verbal language when you're moving on in numbered lists. Nobody can see what you're writing. So saying, for example, I want to look at the senior leadership of these organizations. The first thing I want to look at are the number of principals. The second thing that I want to look at, like letting them know when you're moving on inside your structure, that's a proxy. Structure is really a proxy for organization.
Yeah. Definitely. I need to work on that.
Girik.
Hey, hi Jenny. Am I
Hi.
audible? Hi, so I just wanted to ask when you were explaining the three clarifying questions. So first and second, I think I caught. What was the third one that you mentioned you
Yeah.
generally look to go to?
So first was anything I missed. Second was clarity on the business
Yeah.
operations, who they sell to, what they sell, et cetera. The third one was clarity on the case objective. How are you going to measure success? Many MBA cases have two case objectives. They do that on purpose to try to test for two things, both overlap and complexity. Like, can you handle the fact that I ask you to do two things to gain both market share and profit? Right? The overlap for that clearly is going to be revenue growth, right? But does that mean that I only look at revenue growth? No, it doesn't, right? Because this is a complex business that has a lot of things going on, and so we're probably still going to include cost in our structure. So, when I give you multiple different objectives, the most important thing is to understand what they are, maybe in that case how they fit together, and then most importantly how you're going to measure success.
Thank you. Thank
You
you.
always kind of lay out a proposal. You don't say, I'm going to use a 5% growth rate. You say, like, I would estimate that they would use somewhere around a 5% growth rate. Does the client have a target in mind? Right. And so then you're constantly asking these open-ended questions with hypotheses so that you're advancing a business conversation clearly.
Got it. Thank you.
I just had a flashback. One of the cases that I worked for was for Universal Orlando. And at Universal Orlando, we were explaining something to the CEO of Universal, and he was really mad about something that we were recommending. And so one of the ways that the partner explained it was he said, well, most of the peers that we work with in this space target around 5%. And you could see immediately, like the CEO, it felt like a credible point. And the CEO said, well, we target 4%. And it changed the nature of the whole conversation because all of a sudden we said, well, what if you targeted 5%? That would make a huge difference in your business. So those kinds of conversations, they're not just made up inside the case. They actually happen inside the wild too. I know I've kept you all for an hour. Does anyone have final questions? Because I love these questions. I really hope that you are, just ready to go.
I have another logistical question about if you join Black Belt, what is the period that you guys are not working because of the holidays that are coming?
Like, I don't know if anybody's working on Christmas Day, but pretty much like our coaches know. I mean, a lot of them are MBAs, former MBAs, so like they know this is go time. And so, if you have questions about it, you can actually just go online before you book and see what availability we have. I will say that we encourage everyone who registers to pre-sign up for every case that you want to do between now and the interview, because then you know what your schedule is and you have the vision for that. You can always change them. You have up until 24 hours before a coaching session to change the timing. But then you are like, you put yourself on a cadence and you have the structure to do that at this time of year. That's really helpful.
Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. It was a very useful session.
Good. I'm so glad. No use in wasting anybody's time. Camila, what about you? You have a question?
Hi, Jenny. Thank you very much for such interesting presentation today. MBA student, Brandeis University, and I have some simple question, I believe. So if we apply and we get an interview and we didn't done successfully as we want, and we applied for another position in the same company, are they Big Four or like any other consultancy? Do they do like notes that the person in that interview did not as well? Or no? Thank you.
So if you make it through the first round, you're good, right? Because at that point, they're basically saying like you passed the fail test is the easiest way to say it, right? And so what they basically said was like, this person could do the job. And then in the second round, they're picking who they think would be the best cultural fit, who is the most ready to do the job. But like everybody is inside the zone at that point. If you fail the first round, it kind of depends on what happened, right? Like if you didn't finish the case, If you were nice, but just underprepared, if you were really nervous, if you didn't have a ton of business background and they could just sniff it out, right? They knew it wasn't there. Like there are certainly people that you meet and you're like, you could be good, but you are not good enough today. There are other people that you meet that you're like, I just can't see it. Like you might get there, but I just can't see how you're going to get there. Depends a little bit on which category that falls into. So I always just tell people, if you get through the first round, you're kind of in the comfort zone.
Thank you.
But that first round fail can be something, and they don't keep it forever, but they will keep it through your MBA, right? Like, so until you graduate, they would expect you to go get a different job and apply for a different role at that point, and then your slate is kind of wiped clean.
So just a small clarification, did I answer you right that if it's two different positions, one for like example internship and other like project management or something, assistance or something, and they still require to do these cases, and for example on internship position you failed, but on like for another position you did you passed, they do some notes that for that internship position that person failed. Like, do they do notes?
Oh, got it. So if you're applying for the two roles at the same time, it just doesn't matter, right? Because like the success is going to negate the failure. If you're applying for an internship role and then in the fall of next year you come back and you reapply for a full-time role, then that matters. They keep your file while you are a student, because really an internship is like early admittance into the firm for the same project management role, right? And so I hope that that's maybe a little bit more clear. But the internship is really just like internships in consulting didn't start because they think interns are great. In fact, interns are like, you're just not ready to do a lot. But they do internships because they don't want you to go into banking and they don't want you to go into tech. Like that's why they have internships. Corporates have internships because they don't want you to go into consulting. They want you to come there. And so like, that's why the internships are there. Recognizing that helps you understand, like they're trying to hire you through the internship. They're not just testing you out. They actually they're like, you basically start with a offer to return and you have a chance to lose it over your summer. Whereas the difference when you're going into a full-time role is that you're starting from a place where they're more willing to and open to train you. But what's happened in the market recently is that a lot of them fill most of their positions through the internships.
Thank you very much for clarification.
Yes, you're so welcome.
One last question, Jenny. Do you have any best practices around how to take notes on when someone is, speaking out the prompt? Because I generally struggle with lengthy prompts to, capture a lot of information, and then, it's not very good to ask many questions. Mustn't be done with the prompt as clarifications. So just to know if there are some best practices around what to write, how to write, I'd love to know that.
Yep. So what to write and how to write, I don't have a great idea, but I try to condense my notes into a third of a page when I'm walking through a prompt. And I focus on 4 things that they talk about in the prompt, and I try to make sure I check the box on all of them. So the first one is the company. The second one is the industry. The third is key data. And the fourth is the business problem. And out of the 4 of those, the business problem is by far the most important piece for you to state. And so as long as you've got the business problem focused inside there, then you're really going to see yourself, the data is like a bonus, right? So you don't have to worry about asking questions, because if you've got some of the data, but not all of it, you don't actually need 100% of it. What you really need is the business problem. And so I never mind if somebody comes back and asks for additional data that they didn't capture, but in the data, I try to write down one of 2 things, either the number or the unit. So that if I go back and ask a question, I'm not just like read that whole part again. I say, I got 800 million, but I didn't write down whether it was revenue or units sold. Can you just remind me of what that number means? Or I wrote down units sold, but I didn't write down what the number was.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Jenny.
Mateus.
Thanks so much for this overview. It was amazing. I'm not going to put the camera just because I'm my PJ. So the question is, the question here.
Yeah, you are.
My question is more like, I am in the final round for one of the MBBs right now. And I was just wondering, like, do you have an idea what the percentage of people who go to the final round and actually get accepted after?
It's around 40 to 50%. It's pretty high, actually.
Okay.
So the first round is like 20 to 25%, and then the
Okay.
second round is around 40 to 50%.
Okay, great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
So from application to offer, 2 to 3%. But once you get into the interview process, definitely higher. But yeah, I mean, right now they've basically said, we think you could do it. We're just not sure how good you are vis-a-vis your peers. Let's go see what happens. How much do we like you, right? Do we have vibes? How cool are your PJs, right? There's so many questions.
They're blue with stripes, so they're okay.
Okay. Pretty vanilla. That's very McKinsey, you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. I will on Wednesday in the black belt session go through the anatomy of a case, and I'll teach a little bit more deeply about each one of these kind of core pieces so that everybody has similar language as you're going through it. But yeah, I really had a lot of fun talking with y'all today. Final call for questions. Jay, is anything in the chat that I still need to address?
No, that's great.
No, I'm just. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying thank you.
I'm just disappointed we didn't get a shot of those PJs.
I know.
That's for later, Japheth, after the offer. Yeah, that's a different conversation.
After party.
The offer, I'll tag you guys on LinkedIn with my PJ.
Like a pajama party, right? Yeah, please do that. Great. Well, if y'all have questions, I don't think Japheth put it in the chat yet, but Japheth, you're welcome to put my LinkedIn in the chat. But Jenny Ray LaRue on LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me. My DMs are open. Happy to help. Like I hope that you feel from us. We just have a real passion for not having you guys waste your time, for getting you the offers that you really want. And we can't walk into the interview with you all the way, but we can definitely give you your best shot. And it matters a lot to us that it's not a lack of information or a lack of practice. Sometimes the cards fall the right way and you get a great interview and a great connection with your interview. Sometimes you don't. We can't fix that, but we can definitely fix the prep process. And we'd love to help if you're game for it. Thanks for your time today and good luck.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to this MBA case prep strategy episode. If you've got any questions or want to join our Black Belt coaching program or another program, check out the links in the show notes or just go to managementconsultant.com where you'll find all the good stuff. If you've got an idea for a future episode, you've got questions, send us an email, team@managementconsultant.com. Again, that email is team@managementconsultant.com. We'd love to work with you. And we'll see you on another episode soon.